Hi everyone, Peter here from Movement and Performance, and in this presentation we're going to be discussing interset rest periods. So how long should we rest in between our sets of exercise? And we're going to discuss different training qualities, and maybe depending on what quality we're training, our rest in between sets might actually change. So the first thing we need to understand is what actually happens when we have short rest periods versus long rest periods. So on the extreme end, when we have very short rests, we have more fatigue accumulated. We have greater amounts of metabolic byproducts that don't have time to clear if we have shorter rests, which means that the actual exercise we're performing, we can't perform at a high intensity. We have to lower the intensity. However, some benefits may be that shorter rest periods are going to be more time efficient, which will become important later on when we talk about hypertrophy. So then when we have longer rest periods on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have much less fatigue. We can therefore produce higher intensity and higher quality work. Our movement patterns will be greater because of the lower fatigue accumulated. However, it is much more time consuming to have longer rest periods. We're going to be talking about in this presentation anaerobic activities, but if you want to understand more about the rest and the work to rest ratios of metabolic conditioning, you can see the video, The Essentials of Metabolic Conditioning for Athletes, and you can learn more and get into a lot more detail about sort of the rest periods of conditioning exercises. So first up, speed and power exercises. Speed and power exercises are very intensive on the central nervous system, and therefore we require much longer rest periods. So because it's so central nervous system intensive, if we don't have enough rest, we can reduce our coordination. But when we actually train these qualities, we're not actually going to get any better unless we have very high quality movements and very high intensity exercise. Otherwise, we're simply not going to get the desired adaptations of speed and power. So low fatigue is necessary to perform with the highest quality. And also, lastly, our anaerobic energy systems need some time to actually fully replenish so that we can perform each set and each rep with maximal intensity. So some practical sort of guidelines: for speed training, at least 1 minute rest for every 10 meters run. So if we do a 40-meter sprint, we probably need around 4 minutes of rest at least to actually perform that at the highest intensity. And power type exercises are going to vary depending on the exercise you use, but generally you need less rest than you do with speed training. But a good sort of practical guideline for power is to allow enough rest so that each set that you perform is maximal intensity and maximal effort. Otherwise, if we're not performing within at least 90 to 95% of our best, our highest intensity effort, we're not actually going to get the desired adaptations that we're training for. Moving on to maximal strength training, quite similar to the speed and power guidelines. It's very highly CNS dependent, central nervous system dependent, but it's less about movement quality and more about maximal force production. So the central nervous system, if that gets fatigued, we're going to reduce how much force we can actually produce. And again, we require full anaerobic energy system replenishment in order to actually perform that exercise at maximal intensity. And if we cut our rest too short, we're not going to have this replenished in time to be able to use it to its full extent in the following sets. So longer rest periods are required. However, we want to make sure that the rests aren't so long that our central nervous system excitement becomes dulled, in quotation marks. So if we work up to a given weight that's, let's say, at 85% plus of our 1 rep max, let's say in a squat, for example, then we need to actually make sure that we don't do our warm-up sets and then take an extremely long, 12 minutes rest, 10 minutes rest, 10 minutes plus rest between before we do our maximal intensity sets. Otherwise, our central nervous system may simply not be at the right excitement level to actually perform that exercise. So usually, practically, a good practical guideline will be about 3 to 6 minutes rest between sets. For lighter, more isolation type movements, 3 minutes is probably a better idea. For heavier compound lifts, 6 minutes rest between sets may be required, especially of athletes at a high level. So moving on, the last one we're going to talk about is hypertrophy, and definitely the most controversial. So do we want long or short rest periods for when we're aiming to maximize hypertrophy? So this is quite a complex topic and it's still not fully understood, but the research shows that generally longer rest periods are going to be better for hypertrophy. However, this is sort of an indirect means to an end. The reason that longer rest periods are probably going to be more beneficial is because it's going to allow more volume to be accumulated. So if we, let's say we perform 3 sets of 10 reps and we only have 1 minute rest in between our sets, then in order to perform those 10 reps, we're going to have to reduce the load of the lift that we're doing. Or we have to keep the same load, but we're not going to be able to complete the 10 reps. So the longer rest periods are simply going to allow us to perform more total volume. However, short rest periods may actually have some benefit for the following reasons. So the first is that the increased metabolic byproduct accumulation may actually offer some hypertrophic benefits. So if we have very short rest periods, we get a build-up of metabolic byproducts, even at very light weights, and we can actually stimulate very high threshold motor units because the low threshold motor units get fatigued from the metabolite accumulation. So this can be a useful strategy if an athlete has limited time to actually train for hypertrophy. They want to get the most bang for their buck in the shortest amount of time. This may be a way to do that, or it could be a good variation from traditional training where we use longer tight rest periods. And that's it for this presentation. Hopefully you got something out of it, guys, and thanks for watching. You can follow Movement and Performance on Facebook and Instagram, and if you haven't already, you can subscribe to this YouTube channel for more informative videos in the future. So if you're a curious person, and if you're watching this video, you probably are, you want to learn more, on Movement and Performance on the Facebook and Instagram page, we'll have these research infographics, which are basically the latest research summarized into these easy to understand graphics so that you can stay up to date with the latest research in sports performance training. You'll also find training footage of athletes and some other short informative videos covering some topics very briefly. Thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you got something out of it.